الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك ولك الشكر على كل نعمائك ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه وأشرف هديته خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Sisters and brothers, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقل الحق من ربكم فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر إنا أعتدنا للظالمين نارا. Chapter Kahf, verse 29. And say, the truth is from your Lord. Now whoever wills may believe, and whoever wishes may deny. Surely we have prepared for the unjust a fire. A brief recap of last night's themes. I outlined few things that we need to pay attention to. Being conscious of the transformative effect of Ashura and the programs that we attend. The question of getting close to Ahlul Bayt and being mindful of their values, ideals, is critical, that constantly should be at the back of our mind. And at the end of the meeting, or at the end of the 10 nights program, 11 nights program, should ask ourselves, are we more closely associated with these values or not? And also I pointed out that disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sinfulness creates a veil on our hearts, inner hearts and soul, that ultimately has ramification when it comes to understanding truth, haqq and batil. Third, briefly, was something that Abu Abdullah salawatullah salamu alayhi mentioned in one of his slogans that he has left us with: "An-nasu abidud dunya." The love of material and the glamour of this world really gets to the point that blinds us of the reality outside. And hubbud dunya detaches us and does not allow us to pay attention to tazkiyatun nafs and the purification of the soul. That Quran, on a number of occasions, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The soul is a trust in our hand, and those who purify it will succeed, and those who don't corrupt it ultimately will pay a price. Supporting justice and combating despotic rulers is again another concept or value or a message that we should learn from Karbala. How closely we associate it and how we stand up to these despots around us is something that informs us of how close we are to those values. Tonight, Inshallah, I want to still remain on the theme of transformation, but look at it from a different angle, and that is choice. The choices that we make. Humans are exceptional creatures, distinguished by our remarkable capacity to make conscious decision and conscious choice. This ability to make decision at the time where we find ourselves on, say, before a situation where we are required to do one thing or the other. This ability sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. And these choices enable us to not only shape our personal life, it also enable us to shape our world and the environment we live in. These choices have also an immediate consequence that informs us where we locate ourselves vis-a-vis the moral and ethical principle that we are in. If one finds oneself in front of a sin and one does not step back, one does not step back. Story of Yusuf, for example, is a living example. Zulaykha comes, قالت هيت لك. I'm ready. What did he say? Alaykum salam. He says, Ma'adallah, now I have a choice between one or the other. He makes a decision. So these choices that we make, they have significance as far as our moral and ethical position that we have in life. The nature of human action has always occupied the mind of philosophers, thinkers, religious scholars, not only in Islam, in other faiths as well. Constantly they have discussed, are we as human beings, do we have free will? Or somehow there is a predetermined external factor that controls our behavior, and our responsibility is nothing more than the responsibility of a robot being controlled by somebody else. In Islam, there's a huge literature, both in Sunni and Shia schools of thoughts. There are those such as Ashura that they say humans don't have free will. Their will is destined by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mu'tazila, on the other hand, claim that no, it's the free will, absolute free will that exists in human being, and Allah has given us this power, and then somehow the clockmaker sits back, allows the clock to dictate. Shia, on the other hand, a hadith that we have, la jabr wa la tafwid. We are not predetermined, absolute predetermination, and not absolute free will, that God has no role to play. Bal amrun bayn al-amrayn. There is something in the middle. So the nature of human action has been one of those themes that constantly discussed in Islamic theological reflection. If we look at the Holy Quran on the surface, I must mention this, on the surface, it appears to support both God's supreme and all-powerful position as well as human responsibility. But how to interpret these is the matter for Ahlul Bayt. They have done it, but the scholars have disagreed. And because of this critical nature of free will, it's been discussed repeatedly, and even today the scholars discuss it, the relationship between human free will and Allah's power. What does it mean to have free will? Alaykum salam. What does it mean to have free will? Free will implies that individuals possess autonomy and are not driven by external factors and predestined forces that turn us into robots. It is this critical nature that, if, for the Shias at least, our argument is, if we are predestined and somebody else controls our behavior, the concept of punishment and reward that so much discussion exists in Islam becomes meaningless. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this remote control and dictates how we behave, then the notion that I will be punished for something that Allah has already done it is what we call dhulm and unjust, because I have no influence whatsoever in it. This is something that we have discussed quite a lot. One of the fascinating consequences of free will is our ability to adapt and change course in life once we realize that the path taken does not lead us to the right destination. We have power to change our habits, modify our behavior, learn from our own experience in the past, and accordingly shape the future as we go about. For Islam, the concept of free will requires the existence of two fundamental principles. Number one, as a religion that is founded on revealed law, it requires an intelligence capable of grasping the meaning of these laws. This is why there is a hadith, لَيْسَ عَلَى الْمَجْنُونَ حَرَجٌ, and other sources, other sayings, that when somebody is dispensed with the power of intellect, then that person cannot be blamed and cannot be responsible for their deed. So the existence of intelligence and aql is necessary, and also a will inclined to either submit or reject. The verse that I started with at the beginning that says, قُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, one of these verses. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. The freedom of choice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the guidelines, provided you with all the necessary information that you want. You have the choice, we have the choice to accept or reject. But remember, all choices that we make at the end of the day have consequences on the day of judgment. And all of these, both of the concepts that we have regarding the aql as well as the free choice, we have them both in ayat and ahadith. There is a hadith from Usul al-Kafi. لَمَّا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلَ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the intellect, استنطقه, questioned it. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ أَقْبِلْ فَأَقْبَلْ. After questioning intellect, asked the intellect to come, and he moved forward, followed the instruction. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ أَدْبِرْ فَأَدْبَرْ. Said, go back. He went back. ثُمَّ قال, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells aql, the intellect, مَا خَلَقْتُ خَلْقًا هُوَ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْكَ. There is nothing close to me than intellect, aql. وَإِيَّاكَ أُعَاقِبْ وَإِيَّاكَ أُثِيبْ. When you have the power of intellect, if you don't use it, then you deserve to be punished. And if you use it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that on the day of judgment, huge number of people will be directed to go towards punishment of Allah, and they receive the wrath of Allah. Why? Lahum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them power of intellect and vision that they never used. So the power of intellect is necessary. إِيَّاكَ أُعَاقِبْ وَإِيَّاكَ أَثِيمُ. When you have the power of intellect and you don't use it and you disobey, then naturally you will be punished. As far as verses in the Holy Quran that clearly indicates choice, one was the one that I recited, another one, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. We provided them with guidelines, whether they have the choice to follow or not to follow. Or another verse, لِيَهْلُكَ مَنْ هَلُكَ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. Those who decide to disobey, they must have clear guidelines in front of them so that on the day of judgment they would not say, "Oh Lord, we didn't know, you didn't give us the guidelines." And those who stay on the right path, they do it because there is a guideline that they follow. Let's now use this concept of choice and the consequence of it and the moral and ethical labeling. Alaykum salam. Go back to Karbala, return to Karbala. Karbala, the story of Karbala, is an example of choices that people either made or didn't make when they were given the right to decide and understand their position vis-a-vis Imam Hussein. When we criticize these individuals or we salute them, it's based on the right choices that they have made when they were confronted with this reality in front of them. When Imam stands up and decides and informs them that Yazid is not worthy of swearing allegiance to, and I am leaving Medina for somewhere else. There are those who kept quiet. They didn't say anything. They were asleep. And some of these figures are really, when one reads the history, they are the elite of the Shia community or the Muslim community of the time. And yet, they make wrong choices. One of them is Abdullah ibn Hanzala ibn Abi Amir, also known as Hanzala the Ghasilul Malaika. Abi Amir, one of the strong opponent of the Holy Prophet, a strong follower of Abu Sufyan. His son, he is in one camp, his son made a choice and stood with the Holy Prophet. He gets married on the night where the Uhud battle starts. In the morning, he departs. He stays with his wife for one night. Abdullah is the son of this individual, not even able to do the ghusl that he needs to do before he joins the army. He is killed in the battle, and the Holy Prophet says, I can see him being washed by the angels between heaven and earth. And this is why his name became Hanzala Ghasilul Malaika. His son, the son of such an individual person, makes bad choices when it comes to Imam Hussein. Does not respond to Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein leaves and he doesn't say anything. 2 years later, and he sees, or a year later after Ashura, he sees that it is necessary for him to go to Sham and find out exactly who is Yazid. The idea of the information that Imam Hussein gave about Yazid, for him is not sufficient. Goes to Sham, sees Yazid, sees how he behaves, comes back and says, Yazid is not worthy of being the leader of the Muslim community. You see, this individual, that on the one hand, his father was killed in the Battle of Uhud with the Holy Prophet. And he grew up under the auspices of the Holy Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. Swear allegiance to Abdullah ibn Zubayr when Imam Zain al-Abidin is present. A few nights ago we were discussing how ma'rifah is reduced, that we really don't understand the Imam, is one of these classic examples of making wrong choices. Abdullah ibn Ja'far is another person that makes a wrong choice. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya is another person that makes a wrong choice. And the story of Karbala unfolds with people. You can divide people as far as their reaction to Karbala or to uprising Imam Hussein in three different categories. There are those whom Imam Hussein goes to them and they refuse to join. And some of them regret after Karbala, and they come to Karbala to weep and so on, that we wish we had done differently. And others, immediately as the Imam goes to them, they accept and join. And few of them, unfortunately, they join the Imam, and on the night of Ashura, when the lights are turned off, and Imam says, I would remove my bay'ah from you. You can leave, they leave. You come close, so close and yet so far away. The opportunity for you is being created to pass what I said. Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi last night, the message or his statement regarding death, he said, وَمَا هِيَ إِلَّا قَنْطَرَةٌ, just a small bridge that takes you away from the pain of this life into absolute bliss. They came so close to the night of Ashura, and yet they decided to go back. Some of these individuals, when Imam goes to them, what do they say? One of them says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I am afraid of death. I cannot join you, but I have a good sword that I can give it to you. The other one says, I have a good horse that runs like anything. Imam says, the whole project is to capture your soul and your heart. I don't need your sword or your horse. So here we stand about making right choices or wrong choices. Another issue, Qiyam al-Tawwabin, 65 after Hijrah, which is about 4 years or so after the incident of Karbala. These are elite Shias that wrote letter to Imam Hussein, come to Kufa and lead us. And yet, when Imam came, they deliberately stayed behind in Kufa and they did not come to support Imam Hussein. Then later on, just before Mukhtar's uprising, they decided we have committed sin, we have to wash our sin by being killed. So we're going to attack the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and others, and 5,000, 6,000 were destroyed and killed. What was the consequence? Nothing. Had this number, 5,000, joined Imam Hussein in Karbala, the course of history would have been changed. So the idea is that we stand at a junction. Our Karbala today is how we deal with the despotic rulers, with injustice and everything else that is around us. What choices do we make? Ultimately, the history would tell. In Gaza, the latest statistic is that 48,000 people, mainly women and children, have been killed. And close to 89, or some people say 100,000 people have been injured. There is nothing left of Gaza. Gaza has been turned into the Iron Age. And yet, we have people these days within our own countries that companies support the Zionists rather than support the Palestinians. Where are they? Close to 1.2 billion Sunnis around the world. Nothing. Nobody says anything. The choices that we make, where do we stand vis-a-vis the injustices around? Whether it's wherever they are. Ultimately, the history would say there was a picture of a cart being driven by a donkey in Gaza because the roads were not there anymore. And somebody wrote a comment under it. History would judge us that the best person that supported Gaza was a donkey. We all withdraw. And the same thing happened in Ashura. All the massacre took place. People come out. When the Ahlul Bayt are taken into Kufa, people are drawn by thousands to do what? To watch Ahlul Bayt coming as Usara, prisoners of war. And one or two elderly individuals starts crying when Zainab Salamullah alayha stands up and delivers that scathing attack against people of Kufa. Zainab says that these people are crying. So where were they 2 days ago, 3 days ago? In Sham, the same thing. So the choices that we make, the concept of free will, we cannot claim insanity that we don't have the intellect. We do. And also, what is absent here is not the intellect. What is absent is the use of the free will in the right path and making the right choices. We tend to ignore as if nothing is happening around us. It's our decision, our will, exercising it properly that would shape the world that we live in today and in the future. And it would tell us at the end of the day, where are we located as far as moral and ethical principle? There is a saying from Imam Hussein, it says, "Mithli la yubayi'u mithlah." What does it say? It says that in the context of human history, you will find an incident or an instance in which you are forced to submit, either accept or reject the power of the despot or legality of the despot. If you stand within my camp, you are not going to submit to it. But if you don't, then it is the other camp. Don't think that people in Kufa or those who attended Karbala and fought Imam Hussein, all of them were Uthmanis, or all of them were supporters of Bani Umayyah or Yazid. No, there was a good chunk of it that they came from Kufa. And these are the same, because we see it from the speech of Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi on the day of Ashura, pointing out one by one the name of these individuals that had signed the paper and their signature was on the invitation. Oh Fulan, weren't you one of those who signed this paper? But Hubb al-Mal, Hubb al-Dunya, ease, comfort zone, etc., prevented them from sticking to the right path. Why is it that last night as we finished, the Arabic lecture was talking about Habib ibn Madahir. Why Habib ibn Madahir was able to join Karbala from back door, going outside Kufa and finding a way to come Karbala. And people like the leader of the Tawabin were not able to join. They didn't want to. It's not that they didn't have the intellect. They had the intellect, but the exercising of free will in the right way, it wasn't done. So when we talk about transformative concept or nature of Ashura, one of them is about the choices that we make in our life. Are we prepared to make the right choices when we find ourselves at the fork? Right, wrong, haq, batil, tyranny, justice. Where are we going to go? Both in personal and on social level. When we see poverty existing, are we going to help? Remember a hadith a few nights ago I talked about Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, when somebody comes and says, there are a huge number of Shias in our community. He says, oh yes. And then he gives a list. Do they support the poor? Do they forgive the sinner and those who have shortcomings? Are they compassionate towards each other? He says, no, Ya Ibn Rasulullah. He said, these are not Shias. Our Shias do that. So, lesson that we should learn from Karbala is that from now onwards, at least, no matter how many majalis we attend, how many commemorative, if at the end of the 10 days, when we walk out of the mosque, our choices and decisions are not morally reflective, then we have a fundamental problem. And history will judge us, criticizes us, that at this critical juncture, we didn't do much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the classic concept in Karbala, once it finished, it was able to discern between the true believers and those who pay lip service to the faith. وَالدِّينُ لَعِقٌ عَلَىٰ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ. You swear allegiance to the faith so long as the faith does not intrude in your comfort zone. Otherwise, قَلَّ الدَّيَّانُ. Once faith comes in and asks us that you have to do certain things that you are not, it's against your comfort zone, you leave it. Discern between the true believers and those, as Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salamu alayhi said, ashbah al-rijal. These are not individuals that Ahlul Bayt can trust on them in changing the reality of the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of the Imam, inshallah, because we desperately need his presence. And as we go towards the end of the month, this program, please pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah would grant us the privilege of at least learning something from Imam Hussein and standing for his values and principles that he had, and recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the soul of all people who have deceased. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.